Okay, joined today by Glenn Prunster in our Perth office. How are you, Glenn?
Good, Drew. How are you?
Mate, I'm good. Thank you for coming back on the chat. Wanted to talk to you today quickly about how to sell paint and panel shops. It's something that come across the books quite often. Every now and then there is really strong demand. What should I know if I've got a paint and panel shop? What are some of the challenges I might have before I go to market? What should I really look at? What are buyers looking at? How do we go about that?
So one of the first questions I'll ask when I'm looking at a panel and paint shop is, what are the contractual connections or commitments with the insurance company? What's actually in place? So from a buyer's perspective, the insurance contracts can be quite attractive because obviously you have pretty much guaranteed revenue. But from a business perspective, the insurance contracts can often be detrimental to the financial performance. So the way they work is the insurance companies will commit to volume on a fixed price, which can lead to low margin. So that's why that's one of the key things I'll consider when I'm doing an appraisal on a panel and paint shop. So if they tell me that 90% of their work is under contract, well, then I know that they're probably going to be running on very tight margins, which can be challenging in terms of finding a suitable buyer in that respect. The converse to that is if they tell me they've got no contracts in place, some buyers may see that as too risky in terms of guaranteed revenue going forward.
Yeah, so it could have an effect either way. Okay, it's interesting.
Exactly. The other one of the other big considerations is the age and quality of the spray booths and the heating systems they're using to bake the paint.
Yep.
So typically the spray booths, they would typically have probably around about a 10 to 15 year lifetime frame, and they can be quite expensive to replace, particularly now with the new environmental standards that are being introduced. And then in terms of the heating, whether you're using a diesel heater, gas heating, or electric infrared heating for baking the paint, that will have a material impact on the energy costs for the business. So then the next consideration will be, do they have solar panels on the roof? Because it can be quite energy intensive, expensive.
What about staff? How important is it to have a qualified spray painters, that sort of thing?
So staff are critical, particularly when it comes to panel beaters and spray painters. They will have a direct line to your overall revenue. So for example, if you've got 4 panel beaters, you lose one, your revenue will go down by 20+% because that's just the reality, and they're not easy to acquire. In fact, several businesses I've looked at recently are using migrant labour to fill that void, because we see here in Australia there's not that many apprentices coming through the trade. It's not that popular a trade to get involved with, so absolutely staff are critical.
And what about, lastly, I guess, location and the size of the yard and area of car parking and the ability to move cars in and out? That must have some impact as well.
Yeah, it does, and we see some of the bigger operators. They have wrecks parked all around the yard, out in the street, and that really detracts from the business. It makes the business look unattractive from a customer's perspective. You don't really want your car sitting out in the weather waiting to be repaired. So the ones that have undercover storage for vehicles waiting for repair would certainly attract a premium in that regard.
Okay. No, thanks, Glenn. Look, I know there's a lot we can talk about with paint and panel. Anyone looking to sell a paint and panel shop, I'm sure you're happy to have a conversation around maybe getting an initial appraisal done and just looking at anything they can do prior to going to market.
Yeah, absolutely, Drew. I mean, as I say, I've sold a few of them. I know exactly what to look for, and so more than happy to have a chat.
And lastly, buyer demand too. From what I've heard, that the number of big groups buying up smaller panel shops at the moment, so the demand's quite strong.
Yeah, absolutely. So there has been consolidation in the industry through the likes of AMA Group and setting up Gemini, and then there's also AutoFix, which have also consolidated in the space. Carcraft were behind AutoFix. So it's a really interesting space to be in, and oddly enough, the independents outside of those consolidated businesses do quite well. It's almost like there's surplus demand that the consolidated businesses can't meet for the insurance companies.
Yeah.
So the spillover demand often commands a premium, and therefore they can make better margins.
All right. Look, thanks, Glenn. I appreciate your time today. I know there's a lot more to talk about. Look, anyone looking to sell a paint or panel shop, you can find Glenn's details on our website on morganbusinesssales.com. Glenn, you're a champion. Thanks heaps for your time today. Look forward
Pleasure, Drew.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate. Bye.